Have you ever stumbled across something that you definitely didn't want to see? I thought so too, until I found some naked pictures of my wife on her phone, and you wouldn't believe what I found. It turns out she was sending them to her lover. I was completely shattered by this discovery, but I couldn't just sit back and watch her violate our family bond. I decided to get back at her for cheating, and you don't want to miss this story. It's one evening around 9 o'clock, I received a call from an unknown caller. My job involves a lot of people and calls, so my number is seemingly all over the planet. I heard a young woman's voice on the phone. She addressed me by my name and last name, without a patronymic, and immediately asked who I was and what the actual question was. She gave me my wife's name and told me that I needed to meet her more than the lady who called me. I asked if this was my wife's number and called it. A woman answered and gave me my wife's cell phone number. After a brief conversation, I agreed to meet her if she insisted. She asked for the address and I suggested a nearby convenience store. I put on my jacket and wondered who it could be while going down in the elevator. And two thoughts came to mind. There were no enemies and it couldn't be a bad intention to lure me out of the house. That left me with the possibility that it was a prank from my wife. She was at work at this point, as their flower store is open 24 hours a day and she has shifts. I'll tell you right away that what it turned out to be could be called both a trick and a prank from my wife. But let's continue in order. I went downstairs, reached the store, and a few minutes later a cab pulled up. Just a girl, about 23 years old, came out and immediately recognized me, even though I think I saw her for the first time. We greeted each other, and she showed me her wallet and phone from her pocket. She explained that she had been living with my classmate for 2 years, and they were in a relationship preparing for their wedding. They live in a rented apartment and both have part-time jobs, and he also has a car. And with their study schedule, he allegedly found a job and a career in a flower store. That's when I got tense after that sentence. In general, it was a prank from my wife. Well, he leaves to deliver orders. There are shifts, including an evening after school. She is there to clean their apartment and also cooks food. In general, she does it all. During one such cleaning, she found an unfamiliar purse. He'd never worn a purse or a wallet in his life. Of course, I reached inside and found a SIM card. I put it into an old phone and the network was working. This means that the card was recently used. I went to the messages on the SIM card and saw a few from a couple of weeks ago about how cool and unusual it was, and that he had to take a shower in the middle of the night. I looked at who they were sent to and saw that the recipient was my wife's number. She was listed on the SIM card as Margot, even though she has been called Masha her whole life. I looked through the phone and saw that all these messages, as well as my wife's contact, were only stored on the SIM card. This means that when he took the SIM card out of his cell phone, my wife's contact and text messages were gone. But when he put the SIM card back in, all of this, along with the SIM card, appeared in the phone again. "What is your name?" I asked the woman. "Galiona," she replied. "Galiona, I don't even know how to respond right now. Perhaps I should say thank you, but you understand the absurdity of the situation." Suddenly, a stranger appeared in front of me and told me that everything I knew about my life and my relationship with my wife was the opposite. To make a long story short, we stood there in silence. I was a little shocked, but I wrote down her number and the date of these messages, and then I went home. It was 12 o'clock in the morning. I tried to sleep, but the night turned into a detective story. I tried to figure out any inconsistencies in Aliona's story, but unfortunately, I did not find any except for one. The next morning, I was already at work and I called Aliona. "Great selections. Aliona, how did you find me?" "Retitians," I asked. "Well, you took this SIM card and saw an unfamiliar number. As we found out, it was my wife's number." "But how did you find me? Did you call me right away?" "So you didn't believe me," she said. "That's you." I went on his social networking page and searched for Masha Margarita as his friend. I came across your wife's profile and remembered seeing her when he and I went to his work together once. And then I found you and your friends. You have the same last name and you are married, but you have your own page and phone number. That's all. There's no mystery. But that day, I immediately remembered a conversation I had with my wife about her job and her desire for financial independence. I told her that you want to earn money and not to sit on someone else's neck. This is certainly commendable, but you know you have night shifts. In short, if anything happens, it will be over immediately. In general, I called Elena again and asked her to give me the SIM card with the phone. at least for a day or two. When I got home in the evening, my wife had the day off, and my cell phone was lying on the chair as usual. Imslystingpormits. Dean waited until she came back from the kitchen, stood up, blocked the front door to our room, and right in front of her. I took her phone and called her on her cell phone from the SIM card from her lover. That was a show, although now it even seems funny to me. But at that moment, I don't know how I restrained myself, and I don't advise anyone to do the same. When my wife suddenly started batting her eyes and realizing she was never going to leave the room, she suddenly and quickly ended the call. Everyone probably would have behaved differently. Hence, I took the phone of my lover out of my jeans, and right in front of her eyes, I dialed it again. Her face was literally paralyzed. She suddenly began to breathe, as if she was drowning in that chair. The ETA camped secures the deal. Besides you, I heard nothing else intelligible from her at that moment, of course. You'd be surprised, but this is not the end of the story. After crying and sobbing from the bathroom, she came to the hall ostensibly to confess. I'll show you. She told me and started her computer. And then I was more surprised than when I found out about her secret admirer. She showed me that she had been talking to this guy by email 6 weeks ago and even invited him to visit us. Well, why do I need this information? I asked her and got an answer that made me even angrier. I mean, I wasn't planning anything serious, and neither was he. It was just communication and the text he read. It only touches on what happened virtually on the internet. Everything that is written about it being cool and so on is just an accident on the internet and nothing more. But there were a few mutual photos there, that's all. In reality, we were just colleagues. We don't even see each other that often. But what is he? He's a courier. I see, so we were communicating at the post office. That's why there is nothing in the text messages. In general, admitting a small part of their betrayal to avoid responsibility for the big one is a well-known technique. But first of all, what they do online is not better than in reality. And secondly, I am too old to believe that they are like this online. In reality, when they have a night shift, they sit, drink tea, and don't even look at each other. In short, is the divorce, the apartment to me. But her car was bought before the wedding, unfortunately. And although most of it was paid, of course, I have no way to prove it. In the end, I want to talk about this situation. Some may argue that the night shift is to blame, but if someone wants to cheat, they can do it at any time, even during the day. Keeping your partner locked up is not a solution. In fact, if you want to truly know your partner, you must give them some freedom and see the results. As if one infidelity wasn't enough, this woman arranged a second one, this time with another man. However, she failed to hide her actions, and her husband found incriminating messages and photos. Being determined to not let her actions go unpunished, he came up with a unique punishment to ensure she never forgets the pain she caused him. So what did he come up with? Stay tuned for the rest of this video to find out. This story takes place a few years ago in my already happy life. It was a Tuesday, and I remember this because the weekend, which started on Friday, played a crucial role in this story. My wife, Alina, had been urging me all week to visit my parents in the next town. Surprisingly, she suggested I go alone. And around Tuesday, she made her final proposal, which was the last straw in our already struggling marriage. She suggested I go visit my relatives on the weekend and take Natasha from work to go camping in the mountains. We would have a short day on Friday, and then Natasha and I, who is my girlfriend now, would go straight from work and stay until Sunday. This way, we could leave our daughter with my mom, take a break from work and the daily routine, and also visit my parents, who we haven't seen in a while. Thanks for the advice, I told her, not suspecting anything. To be honest, I didn't mind taking a break from each other either. Our relationship was not in a good place at the time, and this proposal was the final straw. I should mention that this is not our first marriage, and we both have children from previous marriages. When we got together and got married, we never planned on having a third child, but as it turned out, a little later, that's a good thing. So my son lived with his mother, but he came to stay with us a lot, and Alina's daughter lived with us. These are important details that will all play a part in the story I'm telling you now. As the weekend approached, I suddenly became more alert. My wife seemed to be in a better mood than usual. Well, what a pair of relatives. What's there to get excited about? But it turned out that there was a lot going on. On Thursday, we were sitting in the kitchen and I had to check the weather for tomorrow. I might have to go to the inner city tomorrow. I picked up my wife's phone, but it was password protected. She works as a manager and always keeps her phone in her pocket, never in her bag. I asked her for the password, even though almost everyone has one nowadays. It didn't really surprise me that night, so I just used my smartphone in the hall to check the weather. The next day was Friday, and I had plans to go out that night or the next morning. Suddenly Lena needed an umbrella for a hike at lunchtime on Friday. It turned out that the umbrella was in my car trunk, but I was at work at the time. I told her to come and get it, and I threw it into my office with my boss. I closed the closet and went into the hall to distribute the goods. I was working at an auto parts store at the time as an assistant to the owner. This store was in great need of an assistant, as I soon found out. Since my boss is a key part of this story, I must mention that he was quite an interesting guy. He hired everyone as sales clerks and was surprised by the lack of cash and the fact that some spare parts would shrink or become hard right before inventory. In short, the spare parts store had its own set of challenges. But we managed to take care of everything, even if we had to give some parts to our husbands at home. My boss, Mikilik, couldn't handle it all. He conducted audits almost every other month, which only caused more losses because we had to close the store for inventory. He also introduced an electronic accounting system, which only made things worse. The employees who were already underpaid were not happy with the new devices, and the accounting was almost ruined. The final and most important question was about installing video surveillance everywhere and on everyone. We calculated the cost of installing it in all the rooms and storing all the records, maintenance of all of this, and so on, and it came out to be a tidy sum. I remember offering him at the time, and it was my offer that also played a trick on my divorce from my dear wife. I said then, Sergei Mikhailovich, can we do things differently? Cameras are good, but maybe raise the salaries of all salespeople. Even with higher salaries, other people will come to work with a better knowledge of spare parts and other moral qualities. However, the salaries are currently at the bottom, which is why we are facing shortages. He says no, Alexei, a person's salary and whether or not they take someone else's money have nothing to do with each other. If a person finds it unacceptable, they will not take it, regardless of whether the salary is 1,000,000 or 100 rubles. Additionally, the fact that they have little knowledge of spare parts means that those who buy often know better what they need and what they don't. So your offer was not accepted. It does not work that way. Well, it's a debatable argument, but all the losses are not mine. I do not pay salaries here either. So I gave an idea and he can do what he wants. The cameras were installed after all, and who knew they would play a role in making me, well, kind of a bachelor again. Back to Friday. My wife arrived on time, as expected. I was in the hall, distributing the merchandise and telling her how to properly account for this particular item. She walks into the hall, and I tell her to wait there for 5 minutes while I finish with what's on the table. Then I'll go and open her office. She stood and looked at the oil filters. When I looked again, she was no longer in the room. I went to the other room, but she was not there either. I went into our office with Mikolik, where there is also a monitor displaying all the video surveillance. My wife was standing outside in the drizzling rain, and it was clear she did not just drop in for an umbrella. She was standing outside the door, under the visor, talking on the phone. I needed something to eat, so I put what I had brought from home in the microwave and stood there, staring at the monitor, waiting for her to finish her call. She then went inside, walked down the hall, and as she was walking, she said into her phone, "I'm kissing you," and then hung up. It was clear that our 2 cameras outside had no sound, but one of the cameras in the hall did. I heard this phrase, much to my shock. But it could have been Natashinka, my friend, I thought. But the tone. My wife said this phrase in a completely different tone than when she talks to her girlfriend, Natasha. Talking on the phone, Yuli almost goes into a squeak. And here, well, somehow too confident and maybe even condescendingly or even mockingly with a sneer, his wife walks into the office. "Here, take it away." I pointed her to our umbrella and asked her to give me her cell phone, supposedly to call me on mine, otherwise I cannot find it here. I opened up her journaled bank of, and there the last call was 45 minutes ago, and it was on my cell phone. And the conversation that I just saw on the camera, there is no reason for it to be gone. But apparently, like those spare parts, it had shrunk or fainted before the inspection. Hello, though, I thought at the time. But we're off. When you get to the parents, text me, said my beloved wife, and ran away. I sat on the chair, twirling my fork in my hands and thinking about which way I should think now and what is going on here in general. I had lunch, finished all my work, and then a text comes in from my wife. She says they arrived safely and she can't reach me because the connection is bad. She tells me to text her if there's anything and not to call. Oh, great! I call back on purpose and the phone has already disconnected. It's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At first, I thought I'd call my girlfriend who also went there. She has a different mobile operator and her phone works better than mine. I call my girlfriend. It keeps ringing, but she does not pick up. I call again. It's the same. I start to worry about my daughter. Where is she? It's been 4 days. Is she already at her grandmother's, or do I have to take her there? I call her. She's already at her grandparents' house. And she adds, everything's fine. She's eaten, and I told my mom too. And then suddenly, it turns out that she had just talked to my mother, and that my mother called from her main phone. And then all these coincidences somehow didn't add up well at all. I got in my car and took a ride to, guess who? To that divorced girlfriend who works with my wife and who left with her and her in-laws right after lunch for the campground. And she adds, everything is fine. I ate and told my mom too, and told her all this too. And then suddenly, it turns out that she just talked to my mom and that my mom called from her main phone. And then all these coincidences somehow didn't add up well at all. I got in my car and took a ride to, guess who? To that divorced girlfriend who works with my wife and who left with her and her in-laws right after lunch for the campground. I arrive at their workplace with my wife. I open the door to their room, and there sits this Natasha looking at me with round eyes. But how is the weather at the camp? I ask her. She begins to tell me that she knows nothing. I say to her, Lena, you better tell me while I am being kind. She doesn't say anything worthwhile, of course, but drops a phrase that, in essence, she won't turn her in. And then she adds that I should sort it out on my own. I won't cover for anyone else here. I'm pissed off. In short, she came to our house and around 11 p.m. I received an ESMS call from my wife, who was on. By the time I reached the phone and called her back, she was already back in her area. But apparently, the girlfriend sent a warning via text message that she was looking for her husband, and the whole scheme with the camping resort was not for hire. Saturday passed and my wife didn't appear on the network. I thought, well then I can safely make a decision. I quietly gathered all of her stuff around the house and put it in a pile by the front door. She didn't come until Sunday, and when she entered the apartment, she wasn't surprised by what she saw. Of course, her friend had already told her everything. Lena Steining began to look at the bags and try to drag them out the door. I said, how can you not be ashamed of yourself? She replied, well, as a matter of fact, if you want to know the truth, you can see for yourself what kind of relationship we've had lately. And even if I try to justify myself, you wouldn't believe me anyway. My surprise on Sunday was boundless. Even though she was caught red-handed and almost in front of witnesses, and her behavior proved that I understood everything correctly, she still didn't confess to me. It seemed like she was leaving room for maneuvering in the future, in case I decided to talk and maybe return. So there you have it. Although the cameras at work aren't very reliable, they were able to catch her betrayal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to rate it and give it a like. Thank you for reading.